have seen examples where Barbadians have essentially said, these are the principles that we will stand by. And let me give you two examples. One, a national example. When the proposal was mooted for a devaluation of the Barbados dollar in the early 1990s, there's a lot of misinformation around that. But one thing, in my view, was clear. The collective sense of national indignation that the Barbados dollar could be devalued created an environment within which an 8% pay cut could be even countenanced, much less implemented. In other words, Barbadians rallied behind the idea of defending something that they're considered theirs and they're considered should not be changed. Now, I travel across the Caribbean, and Caribbean people, and we know what a lot of Caribbean people say about Barbadians, but that pride and industry that is in our motto is not by accident. There are not many places in the Caribbean where something like that could have been proposed and acted out because, in my view, of the collective sense, as I said, of national indignation and rejection of the idea of a devaluation of the Barbados dollar. The second example, I think it was 2001, there was a protest at the university, and a number of students, mainly non-nationals, coming from environments where it was accepted, blocked the road and refused to let traffic pass. And the police turned up in riot gear, because it could have been a riot, turned up in riot gear, and there was a comment that has remained with me from the then Commissioner of Police, Grantley Watson, from that day. He said, this thing about blocking roads is alien to our culture, it is not consistent with our standards, and we will not accept it here. And that was a stand taken by the then Commissioner of Barbados, that that particular means of expression, blocking the public road, would not be accepted. And in fact, at that particular instance, the wife of our head of state of the Caribbean was arrested, and the son of a former, I think he was a deputy prime minister of another Caribbean country, was also arrested. Such was the resolve that this would not be accepted. There are many Caribbean countries where you go, and one in particular, where the first sign of any disagreement with a policy, the road is blocked and people cannot pursue their lawful business. And those are two examples where the collective Barbadian, well, in the first instance, the collective Barbadian response, and in the second instance, the response by the police, determined that a particular course of action had been breached that we needed to be responding to. So it can be done. Since norms and values are at the basis of human behavior, any attempt at behavior change must begin by addressing those norms and values. It is nowhere near as easy as it sounds, and the critical underlying question to address is which we. Because I spoke just now that we collectively must determine those standards and values that we will not give up. It is important, however, that the process must be inclusive of all social subgroups within the society to avoid the natural tendency to social chauvinism that exists in all of us, especially those in positions of authority. In other words, when we are determining what those core values are, we must ensure that we include everybody in the definition of those core values, and they must not be determined simply by those persons who happen to hold positions of authority. But it can be done. And I wrote this a couple days ago, and it is really very interesting, quoting from the very last, almost last statement that the Honorable Prime Minister made this morning. He said, we have to harness a core of shared values and be prepared to fight to the death to defend them. I said, we as a society can draw a proverbial line in the sand and determine that we will not accept anything or anyone crossing that line. Essentially, I think the two are expressing the same principle, that we have to defend what we consider important to us and what we consider to be critical to our society. The real question is, however, are we brave enough to do it? Because it will require an element of bravery. The action by Reverend Curtis Goodrich, the action by Grantley Watson, the action by some of the individuals I've cited constitute an element of bravery. One of the other things the Honorable Prime Minister said is that when we get to the stage where those who are prepared to do the right thing are spiritually weaker than those who are prepared to do the wrong thing, then we can lose a society. So it hangs and is incumbent on all of us to take the responsibility to take action. The very last point I want to make is in relation to a suggestion I made a decade ago now while at the Ministry of Education about a direction I consider to be useful in responding to some of the challenge. I prepared a paper on the National Youth Service of Barbados, setting out the principles of community service and youngsters having a sense of citizenship and responsibility and a sense of giving back to their society as a course of action to respond to some of the weakening efficacy of many of our social institutions. To date, that paper remains just that, a paper. So my question is, are we brave enough to take the action that is required to preserve those things we consider important? Thank you.